for a safe and secure future. This is ABC7 News.
Imagine having people passed out in your driveway. That's just what some residents of one San Francisco neighborhood say they have to contend with as they squeeze past people in order to get home. This viral video is getting a lot of attention, and the I-Team's Dan Noyes has the exclusive story behind it.
ABC7 is committed to building a better Bay Area during the pandemic, and that includes looking at the economic impact coronavirus is having on our community, especially on housing. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dan Ashley.
And I'm Amma Dates. All week, we're looking at COVID-19 and housing. Nowhere is the need greater than in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, where hundreds of tents took over sidewalks. The
I-Team's Dan Noyes is live to show you what's being done to clear the streets of these encampments. And Dan, the video is really staggering.
It really is, Dan and Amma. You know, after the shelter in place took effect, the number of people living on the streets of one San Francisco neighborhood climbed 400%. The city has made some progress, but we found the challenges continue.
Tensions are running high in San Francisco's Tenderloin district. War between the housed.
Can you turn that music down?
And the unhoused.
They're human beings too, sir.
Residents on Willow Alley say they feel threatened by the people living on their street.
Now imagine what's going to happen to you when they see this on the news. Imagine.
Are you threatening him?
Yes, he is. Yes, this is what I live with.
This is what I told you. We live in fear. We live in fear, and nobody cares.
LEFRAK and Daniel Navarro live in condominiums above Willow Alley.
This is the shelter-in-place slum.
What is it like living here day to day?
It's unrelenting. I can't sleep at night. I can't work during the day. I wear noise-canceling headphones when I have to work from home, and I have to have the volume on full blast.
Dee and Daniel tell me they don't feel safe in their neighborhood. People have broken into their building, and drug dealing and drug use is rampant.
In the last 10 days, I myself have witnessed from my window 2 overdoses right by our garage door.
We are under siege, and this is blocks away from City Hall.
But the people who live on this street say they don't feel safe either. Beyond the challenges of living outside, they say residents in the nearby buildings have acted out, pouring water on them from the windows above and running over their tents with cars.
And they pulled in, and then they started yelling at the fact that the tents were kind of close to the garage. So they pulled in, they pulled out, and pulled in and went over it.
When the I-Team walked the streets of the Tenderloin in May, the neighborhood looked more like a third world country than a world-class city. Tents had taken over the sidewalks on nearly every street. An I-Team analysis of 311 data since the pandemic began shows the neighborhood was overwhelmed with encampment complaints. City officials told us they could not move the tents because CDC guidelines prevented it.
The people who live here are vulnerable during this pandemic and are generally more vulnerable even when there isn't a pandemic. They're older folks, their families, their kids. Go inside yet? Did they bring you inside?
Supervisor Matt Haney represents and lives in the Tenderloin. He says the city only took action after the University of California and a group of local business owners sued San Francisco.
It shouldn't take a lawsuit for the city to do its job, and that's what we were saying from the very beginning. But we put together a plan. We put together solutions, particularly the hotel program, legislation, support behind it, which allowed the city to have a response that they could turn to when the lawsuit did come up.
He showed us the progress that's been made.
This corner right here was full of people in tents.
Last week, the city's homeless outreach team finished clearing most of the homeless encampments, moving them into hotels. Back on Willow Alley, residents are still waiting for a resolution. We counted 23 tents and found many people frustrated that the city hasn't solved the problem altogether.
Has the city actually offered you a hotel room?
No, our alley, for some strange reason, this alley and then the next street over has been skipped.
Most frustrating thing about this is that somehow this gets framed as a situation that pits people who are housed versus unhoused. You know, I recognize that these people are victims. This is a failure of leadership.
The residents now tell us the city is saying their alley will be cleared in the next 3 weeks, but the city tells us they can't give us a clear date at this point. So it just goes on and on and on. For the I-Team, Dan Noyes, ABC7 News. Dan, Amma.
Powerful report. Frustrating for everyone on all sides, Dan. Thanks very much. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. The San Francisco Chronicle insider and ABC7 News contributor Phil Matier is here to discuss the issues around this. Phil, why this piecemeal approach? Why not go through the entire neighborhood and put people in hotels, get them off the street?
Well, that Willow Alley is a classic example. I was there this morning, and I would have to say it's pretty much as Dan presented it. But I got to tell you, a couple of weeks ago, it looked a lot worse. So to some degree, they put in portable toilets. And I don't know if that's better or not for the residents there, because when you put in portable toilets, you're basically saying, okay, you get to camp here for a while. We'll see if they clean it up in the next 3 weeks. This piecemeal approach that you're talking about is partly because the tents are everywhere around the city. It's not just the Tenderloin. They've pulled some 300 plus tents out of the Tenderloin in the last couple of weeks. 500 people have been put in hotel rooms at a cost of $250 a night. Now, citywide, they have some 2,000 homeless people in hotel rooms. That comes to a bill of about $500,000 a night. The feds are paying 75% of it, but they've got to get the hotel rooms, they've got to get the money, and then they've got to get the people to agree to go. And as you've seen at Willow Alley, some of those people are not necessarily, let's be honest about it, in their right minds enough to say, yeah, I want to get out of here. A lot of them have drug and alcohol problems, and they're going to stay there as long as they can.
Yeah, good point. So, Phil, what is it going to take, do you think, for city leaders to actually fix this problem?
Fix is it's only got 3 letters in it, Alma, but it's a big word when it comes to the homeless. What they're going to do is they're going to get as many of them in the hotels as they can, because the federal relief money is helping to pay for that. After that, they're expecting, now get this, they're expecting or hoping through a passage of a bond and other tax money to get the $30 million a year it's going to take to put 12,500 of those people in what they call permanent supportive housing. That's a place to live, and also with people, social workers and such there. Is that going to solve the problem? I don't know. I was talking with one supervisor who said you might get them into a house, but is the behavior going to change, or are many of them going to still be out on the streets? Because we put the two together. The behavior you see, the passing out on the streets, on the sidewalk, you don't need a tent to do that. You can do that on your own and still have a place to go that night. So this is a big problem. It's going to take mental health, it's going to take housing, and it's going to take an ongoing effort and continued effort to make the change. This change that Dan was reporting on in the Tenderloin didn't happen until people filed suit. Right. And it took pressure, and it took media pressure, like ABC7 News, when we went down there earlier and showed what it was like. That's what it takes.
Well, let's look a little down the road. I mean, the hotels in the city, because of the pandemic, were a stopgap solution that the city was able, as you talked about, to put homeless people in the hotels. But what about when the pandemic is over? The hotels don't want the homeless in there anymore. They want to reopen to tourists. What's going to happen then?
Well, that's where it's going to get interesting, because once they're in the rooms, how do you get them back out? And Dan, it's already been said at the Board of Supervisors, the pandemic is a health crisis, but once it ends, and who knows how long that's going to be, we still have a housing crisis and a homeless crisis. So you still have a crisis situation. Some hotels are going to say, let's keep in the program because it's guaranteed money. Others are going to say, as you said, it's time to move out. We'll see if they can get them out. They've got to get them into that supportive housing. They have to have it built. They have to have the money ready to go. And they're having to bet on the feds continuing to fund it, the taxpayers fund it, nonprofits fund it, a lot of money and a lot of willpower, but this at least is the first step in a direction. And I will tell you, when I talk to the residents of the Tenderloin, they say at any price it's worth it to get those tents out of there and get their streets back, because they were being held hostage.
Well, you can see when you see the video, it's quite shocking. You can understand how the residents feel, and of course it's difficult for the homeless as well, but the residents have good reason to be so frustrated. All right, Phil, thanks very much. You can read Phil's column in the San Francisco Chronicle on Sundays and Wednesdays.